Now to our series on policing in America and the troubling rise in violent crimes in cities across the country in the years since the pandemic. That rise in violence comes as the nation takes a renewed look at the role of police in communities. So tonight we take a closer look at one community in particular, Oakland, California, and the varying opinions there on how to get the violence under control amid calls for reimagining policing. Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas.
Oakland homicides have now topped 100 for the first time in 7 years.
Oakland, California, like many cities across the U.S., facing a disturbing surge in gun violence.
I don't feel safe, and I don't feel like my kids will be safe.
Violent crime in Oakland is up 14% from 2020. Surges also being seen in cities across the country. Homicides in Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. are up more than 30% compared to the same time last year. But at the very moment when violent crime is spiking in Oakland and other places, mistrust of police in some minority communities is wrong. Following the aftermath of George Floyd's murder at the hands of police officer Derek Chauvin, continued shootings of unarmed black Americans.
I don't think there's any question that this past year has challenged police in ways that they never have. From COVID-19 to the George Floyd tragedy, to the demonstrations that occurred. And then all of this time, violent crime has been spiking in ways we haven't seen in 10 and 20 years, all across the country.
Black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, and queer folks, our relationship with the OPD is contentious at best. Policing has never worked for black people in this country, and it's not broken, and so we can't fix it.
Kat Brooks is a community activist and organizer who has lived in Oakland for over 12 years.
We gave birth to the defund movement here in Oakland, California 6 years ago.
That movement to shift funds away from policing gaining traction. Oakland pledging to cut police funding and direct more resources to community services, even with violence on the rise. But Oakland's police chief, LaRon Armstrong, is convinced police are needed now more than ever.
Homicides up 200% compared to last year, up 100% in overall shootings in the city of Oakland. That violence is at an alarming rate. And so this idea that we defund in the midst of this tremendous increase in violence, I think makes the city less safe.
Even so, Chief Armstrong admits there's a trust deficit earned through mistakes by police and bias in policing and the criminal justice system.
The reality is that communities that have the least amount of trust in law enforcement tend to need police response the most. I think it's about when we do have an incident, how do we make sure that we bring in community early on and allow them to see what happened and to acknowledge that when officers have made egregious mistakes, that they are going to be handled swiftly, that they're going to be held accountable.
Some data appears to suggest that police are paying more attention to African Americans than their white counterparts. And not all of it can be explained by crime patterns or so-called high-crime neighborhoods. In a review of arrest and traffic stop data, ABC News finding in Oakland that in 2018, blacks were 3 times more likely to be arrested than their white counterparts. And a 2020 study of arrest statistics by ABC News finding that black men were 8 times more likely to be stopped by Oakland police than white men. National law enforcement experts we spoke to say these are issues departments are grappling with nationwide. How do you root out those issues?
I think police chiefs are taking a hard look at how they police in some of those areas of the city and asking, are we making ourselves look bad by indiscriminately stopping people for minor things?
We created a concept called intelligence-led policing that made officers actually have to be more focused and make sure that the stops that they were making have some association to criminal activity.
How do you screen people who might look at a black man and see a suspect first and a citizen second?
We have provided training on implicit bias. We've had training on procedural justice and police legitimacy, but now we're instituting all of those things that officers have learned in those trainings into our de-escalation training. We're trying to give them tools to minimize the need to use force. And I think that's the beginning point.
They just keep profiling us. They just keep incarcerating us. It's an avalanche.
The mistrust so high in many cities that a national discussion has been sparked about redirecting money from police to people and agencies that can deal with the problems head on.
Most of what I hear is that the emphasis should be on communities having the resources to keep themselves safe, and that we have defunded schools, housing, healthcare in so many of these vulnerable communities, and all that we fund now is the apparatus for punishment.
But making communities safer and robust is complicated at best. East Oakland resident Keisha Henderson still believes that police are part of the solution.
I would say we can't play politics with public safety. We cannot reduce the amount of officers on foot or in the community just to sound progressive.
And she believes that improving the crime situation in Oakland has to be a collaborative effort.
I never felt safe living in this community. I am not a part of the defund the police movement. I am more about bringing everybody to the table and bringing some type of balance and accountability. That is just where I stand.
But she emphasizes the community needs proper investment alongside better policing.
This type of mess is what creates crime, what makes crime comfortable. If we continue to have all of this type of trash and things that is going on.
Right around the corner, other activists believe they can help prevent the violence by providing care to their fellow neighbor.
Thank you. We would eliminate the need for policing in the way that it exists if we put the same amount of funding into the community, into after-school programs, invest in children, invest in communities, period. So often, folks are upset when folks say defund, but where else would the funds come from to get it done when the majority of the resources go to policing?
As these complicated issues are being addressed in Oakland and cities from coast to coast, the question of how to move forward remains unclear.
How do we move from reimagining to redesigning to reconstructing, which is really what we're asking for right now as a country? No one is the expert because we haven't done this before. It's going to take all of our resources to support processes we have never tried before. And it's why so many folks are trying so many different things. I hope we create the space for them to fail without giving up.
In Oakland, all eyes are on the mayor and city council to work toward a final budget in June, the upcoming fiscal year. So much at stake with so many and often stark points of view.
I would like us to see us get out of this pattern of responding to violence and actually interrupting violence. And that means investments on the front end, in mental health, in trauma, in jobs, education, housing. That's the answer. It's logical. It's right in front of us.
But even with deep differences of opinion, one fact does appear more clear. The status quo, the way Oakland and the nation have addressed crime, race, and policing, appear to be on track for some kind of change.
In my long 26-year policing career, I've never seen us face the challenges that we're currently facing. I see it as challenges, but I do also see it as a tremendous opportunity to re-examine policing practices that have been in place for many years. I think it's a call from community to be more transparent. It's a call for community to think about policy changes. They want to see a different way, particularly minority communities are policed, and how they want to make sure that it's being done in a fair and just way. And I think this is that time.
Pierre Thomas, ABC News, Washington.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.